You are at the right place.
Yes. Good afternoon, VC, sir.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Yes.
How are you?
Fine, sir.
Yeah. My son. Hello, Dudley. Hey, hey, you know, I completely forgot because I was traveling. But it comes from you. It's written in your name. Jimmy. I'm just getting into a meeting at 5. Please do remind me at 7. Bye, sponsor.
Good afternoon, profs.
Good afternoon, Professor Vanzai. How are you?
I'm very well. Nice to see you again.
Yes. VC, you are muted, sir.
I see the VC is also here. Good afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Robert.
So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I'm just quickly going to share my. Can you see my slide? Can you see that?
Yes, Robert, we can see it very clearly.
Okay. All right, good. Then I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. How is your weather over there today?
Well, as you can see, I'm sitting with the jersey on, so it's quite cold.
Okay, what can we do?
I think we can make a start now. Let me start by welcoming our Vice Chancellor, Professor Tutulu, and the Director of Special Projects at MOTE, Mr. Ronnie Futego, and the members of the executive management team at BOOST and the esteemed and distinguished colleagues, it is a great honor for me to make the opening remarks at this presentation today. This presentation is related to the BOTSAT-1 project in BOOST and the plan that we are unveiling as we progress with the project and the collaboration that we're going to be having internationally to ensure that we can deliver this satellite in the scheduled time of roughly 2.5 years from now. We have no less distinguished personality than Professor Robert Van Zyl, who is going to give the presentation today. Professor Robert Van Zyl is a very well-known figure and international expert in the area of nanosatellites and CubeSat. Professor Robert Van Zyl is the current managing director of Clyde Space, South Africa. Actually, Clyde Space is the biggest space satellite company in Scotland, where I am based. Prior to that, Professor Robert Van Zyl has been involved in a number of major projects in the space area, especially satellites in South Africa. He was director of the French South African Institute of Technology at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in South Africa. He trained in the area of high-frequency microelectronics, and he has been involved for several years in the field of nanosatellites as vehicles to develop human capacity in science, in engineering, and technology. FSAT-1 started a CubeSat program in 2009. The program quickly grew to a student body of 50, and Professor Robert Van Zyl was one of the captains of that move. They developed Africa's first CubeSat in space, which was launched in 2013. I think I was a much younger man in 2013. And they have gone on to develop several satellites, nanosatellites in South Africa. And I know that before Robert moved into the private sector recently, they were already working on developing the constellation. So without much further ado, I would like to invite Robert to do his presentation. But before we start the presentation, I just have the program here, so to help us with housekeeping. So it will be the opening remarks, which I've done, then the presentation by Professor Robert Van Zyl. There will be an opportunity for questions and comments for a short period of time of about 10 minutes. And then there will be closing remarks by the Vice Chancellor of BUS, Professor Otlejeswe Totolo. So, Robert, I would like to kindly invite you to take the stage now, please.
Thank you, Prof. It's a pleasure to be with you. I just want to thank you, the VC, Professor Totolo, yourself, and Mr. Ronnie Petegu, Director for Special Projects, for inviting me to share with you my experiences. I'm going to start sharing my screen, but perhaps before I do that, we are all talking about this. I'm not sure if you can see that. This is what we call a 3-unit CubeSat. This is the most advanced one that Africa has already built. This is just a model, don't worry. But this is what we will be talking about. I'm going to share my screen now so that we can
meeting at Greg sent me the
start the presentation. Can I just ask if you can all see that?
Yes, we can.
I can see it clearly. I can see it clearly.
Okay, thank you so much. So what we are here about is about
Donkey, dine gwaith. Okay.
It's just a lag with this transitioning. Just a second. So what we are here about is obviously to talk about BOTSAT-1, which was launched by the Honorable President Masisi 18 December of 2020 last year. Now, I'm going to share with you my experiences that we've had in South Africa. It's not to be prescriptive, but it's for you to understand what it takes to build CubeSats, what it takes to have a sustainable program, and what we need to put in place for your very tight schedule of 2.5 years to get to a point where Botswana will be able to launch its first satellite. So I must just say that the past 10 years that 12 years that I've been involved with CubeSat technology is a hugely disruptive technology. It's very innovative, it's very exciting. It's been the most creative 10 years of my life. And everybody who's going to be involved with this in Botswana will definitely share that same experience. So I'm very excited to be part, in a way, of your endeavors into space. This is where I'm talking to you from in Cape Town. If we were to take this picture a day before yesterday, you would have seen some snow in Cape Town. It's very cold here, but this is not why we are talking to you today. I wasn't expecting an introduction, but I have a slide about myself. Just one slight correction. I'm still the director of the French South African Institute of Technology at CPUT. I will be joining AAC Space Africa on the 1st of October as managing director. And this is a South African subsidiary of a quite bigger multinational nanosatellite company called AAC Clyde Space, which is based in Sweden, but it also has branches in Scotland, Netherlands, and the USA. I started this South African CubeSat program in 2008, and fortunately was involved with the very first mission that's Africa launched. So it's been, as I've said, a quite remarkable life experience for me that I'm very fortunate to be able to share with you. So the agenda today is it's quite a diverse group of people I'm talking to, so I'm trying to give everybody something here, but let's just start with the context of why we have an African space program in the first place. And then for those who does not know yet what a CubeSat is, I will briefly tell you what that entails. And then more about how do you build CubeSats. And I will run through a few missions that we've developed, show you some videos just for interest's sake. And then maybe a bit more serious, exactly how did we achieve all of this? What are the ingredients that you require
I'm on a music now.
to establish such a program that we've implemented here in South Africa, at least. So the context is that Africa, this is an extremely large continent. You can fit China, Argentina, US, Europe, India, New Zealand in the same space as Africa, and then there's still a bit more that you can fill up. So obviously when you have a continent this wide and all the socioeconomic pressures that we have, you really need the global solutions. You need space-based solutions to assist you in addressing those needs that we have in society. So why space program? The AUC, the African Union Commission, defined 40 developmental objectives, and no less than 35 of them can and are being serviced by space applications. And just recently I read in the Africa News, Space News, that 81 applications, space applications are currently being implemented across the continent, funded by Africa as well as foreign institutions. The framework that we all operate in, and we are very fortunate to have this already in place, is the Africa Space Policy that was approved quite a number of years ago. That was followed by an Africa Space strategy. And now the Africa Space Agency that's housed in Egypt. And one of the organs that the academics will be familiar with or interested in at least is the Pan-African University. the Pan-African University is an organ of the AU. It's got a number of institutes across Africa, and Southern Africa has been given the Space Science Institute, and responsibility of that lies with CPUT to host. We are still awaiting the operationalization of that. So the Pan-African perspective is very, very exciting. You know, the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, talks about the identification of space technologies to boost Africa's economic growth and development. And this was also obviously recognized by the Honorable President at his opening speech last year. The Africa space budget as a result of this has increased from about $500 million from 2020 and a 94% increase from 2018 budget. 114 new satellites are currently under development by 20 countries across Africa, and one of them is BOTSAT. And 10 countries are now developing their first satellites. Sorry, this is where Botswana fits in, hoping to join the current list of 13 countries that have put a satellite in space. And I also got this from Africa Space News very recently. So very exciting time that we live in. It's a very, very opportune time for Botswana to get into the space. I want to call it a space race, the space arena. And CubeSats is a very accessible way of getting into that in a very tangible way. So let's just look at what is a CubeSat and what is not. I've already shown you a model that's a real life model that I've shown you. CubeSats are very small. You get mini, micro, nano, and picosat satellites. The nano satellites are mostly between 1 and 10 kilogram in mass, and they come in multiples of units. That's why we call the smallest one that you see there is 1U. The one that I showed you previously was the 3U standard. And how do you launch satellites? You put them in a pod, like peas in a pod. You can see at the right-hand side there, maybe you can see my cursor. The satellites are placed in these pods. The pods are bolted onto the launch platform, the rockets, and then it's launched into space. Like any other satellite, I must emphasize. Now, more than 1,000 of these CubeSats have been launched. Just an outdated graph, unfortunately, is 3 years old. Back in 2018, already more than 1,000 were launched, but you can see this exponential growth that you start seeing in bigger and bigger constellations being launched, simply because nanosatellites are as utilities, not just the capacity building platform that it used to be in the early years. So basically, why are they so interesting to us is because you can do more with less, and this is obviously true for any technology currently available. But if I were to compare ZECube-1, and you can see this little, this is our first satellite I will introduce you just now. It's a 1U CubeSat. It was launched in 2013 by us. And if you just compare that with Sputnik, which was the very first satellite launched by the world, Sputnik 1 in 1957. So it's a bit unfair to compare them, but this is exactly the message. ZECube-1, which is 80 times smaller than what Sputnik was, we're able to do more than what that first satellite could have done. And the last line is so important. In terms of cost, the cost investment required for CubeSats are much, much lower. But they are very useful and become more and more useful as we speak, actually, because there's a lot of innovation happening. So because nanosatellites are, I don't want to say it's cheaper, but it's definitely more cost effective than your bigger satellites, you can build more for the resources that we have, definitely in Africa. So a new, they call it new paradigm of applications open up for you. You can have more satellites in space doing or contributing to a certain application. And what does effectively mean, I will get back to it later, is your revisit time becomes shorter and shorter. The more satellites you have in space, the more regularly it will overpass a certain area of interest, and that becomes interesting for tracking of wildlife, etc., etc. So the applications that's the big broad, I would say, applications that's currently popular on CubeSats. First and foremost is space science. It's a very, very good platform for sensors that you can fly in space, specifically to measure the impact of space weather, the sun on Earth. Obviously, I think what's most interesting to people is usually these high-resolution images. What you can see there on your right-hand side is a picture of the Beijing airport, for instance, taken by Planet Labs satellites. At the time, those satellites were 3 units in size, the one that I showed you right at the beginning. So this is all possible with CubeSats. And then communications. And here I would like to emphasize Internet of Things applications or machine-to-machine communications, because you have these networks, or you can have networks of CubeSats in space. In low Earth orbit, you can have low power links with sensors on the ground, and that gives you the ability, for instance, here is here's an application I thought could be relevant, is to track livestock, where the sensor around the neck of the animal speaks directly to a CubeSat in space, and that is relayed to a ground station, the GPS coordinates. You can even have heart rate, temperature, etc., so you can know what the condition is of a specific animal that you might be interested in. Right. My government funded us since 2008, and when the minister once came to university and she first saw the size of this satellite, she said, "But these are toys," and my life sort of came crashing down, because that is a perception out there. They are not toys. They are definitely spacecraft in their own right. They are just smaller. They provide space-based services while orbiting Earth like any other bigger satellite. They are subjected to the same environmental conditions as big satellites. You can just imagine you put them on a rocket. They experience the same vibrations than your bigger satellites experience. Once in space, they also experience vacuum. They experience temperature ranges. They experience radiation from the sun. They are not protected by the atmosphere at all. And you cannot fix malfunctions. So you have to rely on high reliability design and manufacturing techniques. ZellaCube-2, for instance, has more than 10,000 components on them, no less than 4 computers on board. You must be able to communicate with them over thousands of kilometers when it appears over the horizon. And you only have a few batteries on board and solar panels. It's about 10 watts of power on a typical 3-unit CubeSat, which is not a lot for everything that you need to run 4 computers by itself. That's without the payloads. And then each one of those 10,000 components could be a single point of failure, because the satellites are so small. You do not duplicate any parts or systems necessarily on a CubeSat. So if one system goes, there is no backup. You cannot restart a backup for this. And that is a big, big challenge for CubeSats and the engineers that built them. And they still cost a decent amount of money. This is usually not in the realm of universities. You usually get funding from outside, like you, from government, and like we as well. You cannot ignore the fact that it's still a sizable amount of money that you invest to get this platform into space. Right. I said they're not toys. We put them through various tests like any other satellites: thermal, radiation, vacuum, and vibration. Vibration is the most interesting one. So I'm going to show you here a little video clip of ZellaCube-2, our second mission that was vibrated And this is just, this is sort of nerve-wracking to see when you stand there, because you expect this whole satellite to fall apart if not properly built. So the vibration starts slow, it's called sinusoidal vibrations, and then it steps up, and this mimics all the harmonics that the satellite will experience on the rocket. Nerve-wracking, as I've said. So now that we saw what CubeSat can do, you know, how do you build satellites? And you need the following, and we'll get to more interesting graphical information or supporting information for this slide. But right up front, before you start building a CubeSat, you need an agreement with your stakeholder or your funder about the mission objectives, timeline, and resources. This is the most important step that everybody has to approve on. You need a project agreement, exactly what you want to achieve with your satellite. Is it to grow human capacity, or is it to provide a certain operational service to the country, or both? Do not underestimate this very first step, because if you get your mission objectives not correctly contracted, then that leads to disappointment and mission failure, success failure at the end of the time of the day. You've seen infrastructure already. I will show you some more infrastructure later on, but you need clean rooms, etc. I'll show you just now, but that needs to be in place before you start building a CubeSat. Or at least you need to put that in place in parallel. You need a team, you need human resources, and not just students. You need staff, you need skilled expertise from industry, for example, you know, people who's done it before to help with that team. And then there's regulatory processes. I'm not sure what the regulatory processes in Botswana currently is, but you need some kind of national registration of mission premises and activities. In South Africa, at least, you need to register any space activities with our Space Council, and I would assume that the same will apply in Botswana. And then there's also the international filing of frequencies for your satellite. So once you've decided what you want to do with your satellite, and you have more or less a concept of operations and a concept of the design, and you know what frequencies you will use, then you need to file for that. And that can take anything up from 9 months and longer to get approvals through the ITU. And then the mission itself, you know, there's a conceptualization phase, the project plan, and then you implement that plan. And then there's what we call a launch campaign and the launch itself. And then once in orbit, there's a commissioning phase, and then operations start. And all of this must be supported, or at least happen within the ecosystem for sustainability. I'll get back to this on my last slide, but I think my most important giveaway for you, takeaway rather, is that one should not look at a once-off project. I think, I know that in Africa at least, we need to look at sustainable programs ongoing, so that the real utilization of space can be realized. I'm going to apply all of this now to an overview of South African CubeSat missions. I've been fortunate to be involved in quite a number now, so I will give you a glimpse of how we've done it. Maybe I may just get back to where I'm from, which is the CPT satellite program. We're based in Cape Town. We're the largest university in the Western Cape with about 32,000 students. It's a merger of two technikons, and the satellite program was established in 2009. As Professor Ogbu already alluded to, and it's hosted by the French South African Institute of Technology, and it's fully funded since the inception by our South African government, the Department of Science and Innovation, through the Space Agency and the National Research Foundation. So the infrastructure at CPUT, on the left-hand side, you will see a part of a clean room. We have about a 30 square meter clean room. It's not massive. It's acceptable. You can build up to 3 or 4 missions concurrently in there. Incidentally, this is our Minister of Science and Innovation with the launch of ZQ2 a few years ago. In the middle, you will see a ground station. Ignore this dishes on the left-hand side, but the ground station that I'm referring to is this one on this with these long Yagi antennas. We have now 2 ground stations. One looks after amateur applications. That's just nomenclature for the frequencies that we utilize. And the other one that we have now is also for commercial frequencies, and it goes up to S-band for those who know what that means. On the right-hand side, you can see our premises, our facilities. Right on top, you can see the production facilities, and then it's a design facility. And further down the line, we also have what we call the Product Lifecycle Management Competency Center, PLMCC, which is a virtual design studio where you can actually virtually build the satellite before you start tinkering in the production lab. And then other test facilities, radio equipment. You can see here what looks like a pizza oven on the bottom. That is to cool down components and heat them up again from about minus 30 degrees to about 60 degrees. And then that mimic, obviously, the orbiting of the satellite around the Earth. When it's in eclipse, it cools down quickly, and when it's on the sunny side of Earth, then obviously it heats up again. We are also very fortunate to have access to infrastructure in the Western Cape, and this is important for you as well. You do not have to have all the infrastructure in place in situ. Obviously, there are certain things that you have to have, like clean rooms and test equipment, etc. But the vibration table I showed you earlier, we don't have one like that. We usually take the satellite, put it in a Pelican case, take it to the facility where that's done, and you come back with a report. So you can use these off-campus or off-site testing facilities as well. In the Western Cape, South Africa is very fortunate to have the Space Agency, the Space Sciences Directorate in Hermanus. We have the National Satellite Integration Facilities. I will show you some pictures just there now. And then we also have the Overberg Test Range, which was built by the previous regime back in the 80s to actually launch satellites from there. So the National Integration Facilities, and they're refurbishing all of this. Government is doing that in anticipation of much more investment into our space program. And you can see here the size of the facilities. And this is just a vacuum chamber here in the right-hand bottom corner, where you can put in very, very large satellites, and you can put it in a vacuum and then heat it up and cool it down, again, to mimic its operations and experience in space. Overberg Test Range, this is where rockets are fired from, etc. So this is owned by Denel in South Africa. Right, then I want to get to the team that's necessary, and this is a core team, and this is, I would say, the minimum that you require to build a CubeSat. You obviously need some kind of program director. I'm assuming that role here at CPUT while I'm still here. But then we have a chief engineer who looks after the day-to-day technical work, supported by a project manager. And then there's layers of younger engineers below that, the senior engineers in subsystems, in communications, in software, everything digital. And then we have mission and development engineers, depending on, on where they are in their professional career, and engineers in training. Now, all the members are graduates from the postgraduate program. You can see there's no student here, because for ZQube2, sorry for the later missions that we have, the emphasis was not on human capacity development in terms of students, it was more on professional development and to actually put an operational service for government in place. And for that, to de-risk, you use graduates, you only use staff, and you only use engineers from industry. So our chief engineer, right from day one in 2008, we were very fortunate to have Francois Visser as our chief engineer. He's had lots of experience in the space industry, and he brought that into the team. I would argue that you do need somebody with a working experience of satellite missions in your team on a fairly sort of full-time scale. We follow a systems engineering project flow. I'm putting all this out so that you know the complexity of putting a mission together is not just about having an idea and start buying components off the shelf and put them together. There's different phases, and there's definitely quite a number of reviews that you have to formally sign off with your stakeholders, with your funders, etc., every step of the way. So from mission analysis, your needs identified. I believe this is where BOTSAT is now. We need to get down with stakeholders, pen down exactly what the satellite needs to do. What is the service? What is the data that you're interested in? Or is it human capacity development? That needs to be contracted right up front. And then there's a conceptualize phase where you explore certain concepts. You know what the satellite must do. So what must the satellite look like that will be able to do that? And then you go into a preliminary design and then a detailed design. And after what we call the critical design review, the CDR, you are ready to start ordering components, developing, manufacturing, producing, etc. And that's followed by extensive testing, as you've seen before we get that. And then you get to, for instance, the FAR, the flight acceptance review, and then the operational review, and then the CR, the commissioning readiness review. And after that, the satellites start generating the data that you've envisaged right at the beginning in phase 0. And then there's a disposal phase. You know, the sustainable use of space require your satellite to deorbit within 25 years. And usually we do that by launching a satellite in low Earth orbits. You can also put propulsion on the satellite if you want to bring it back to Earth quicker. A typical CubeSat will operate for 2 to 5 years. After that, it's dead. It's just the nature of the components that we use. So you plan your missions to be 5 years long. And after that, it becomes space debris. So if you have a plan of bringing that satellite back and it burns up in the atmosphere, then at least you do not contribute to all the clutter that potentially can end up in space. Right, so the AIT, or the assembly, integration and testing, the production phase and launch, this is the most interesting phase, visually at least. So I'm going to show you ZECube-1, which was Africa's first CubeSat. It was also named JAPISA-SAT by some school students. It's a 1-year CubeSat, only 1.2 kilograms. You can see there on the right-hand side, it's being put in that pod that I told you about. It was launched from Kazakhstan in 2013. And the mission objectives was to be a pathfinder. I see BOTSAT very much as the same. You need some inspirational mission that hones everybody around a certain objective, and that is to get Botswana into the space arena. There was a strong human capacity development angle to it. That's why the satellite took longer than your typical development phases, because there was a long sort of craning aspect linked to this, and I will get back to that. It was also for technology demonstration. You will see that our first satellite was not intended to provide operational data, and by that I mean potentially commercial data that you can provide to your country for certain applications. That was not the main driver. Our drive was to show that for the first time in Africa, we can build CubeSats, we can launch them. Certain technologies were demonstrated that then was incorporated in our next satellites. So I'm going to show you a short video clip about how the CubeSat was made. If the sound is a bit loud, just bear with me. Yeah, to see there is the actual launch of the satellite on the day. It's not computer graphics, this is the actual launch. And that is the communications of the satellite with our ground station. So after we've shown to the world that we can do this, or more importantly, shown to ourselves that we can build a CubeSat, we went considerably, we notched it up a little bit in terms of complexity and technology, complexity of the satellite. And that was ZACube-2, the second South African CubeSat. And this was launched in 2018 from Russia. It is a satellite that I showed you before. You can see the inner sides there. The mission objective is a bit more serious than the first one. You can see there for vessel tracking. This is to track the beacons on ships while they go around the coastline of Africa. It was all, you can see a camera at the bottom for fire detection. We call that the K-line camera, K for potassium. The camera looks for potassium signature in the images it takes, and that is a sure sign of felt fire. So that is our fire detection camera. It's got about a 60-meter ground resolution, which is sufficient for the purpose. And then also capacity building and technology demonstration. We still had a focus on that. Engineers in training who's not worked on the previous satellites, they came into the program and they were supported by this time quite a team of seasoned engineers in our innovation hub that I will get back to you just now. So here's a little sort of animation video, just 2 minutes long, about what ZACube-2 was all about. Forgive me that I show you this animation video.
On 21 November 2013, the Cape Peninsula University of Technology launched Africa's first nanosatellite, ZACube-1, also called BOTSAT. This pioneering satellite paved the way for ZACube-2, our most advanced nanosatellite to date. It was launched on 27 December 2018 from Russia, weighing only 3.7 kilograms. It took 6,000 engineering hours to complete. The satellite was also built by the CPUT satellite program, which was established in 2009 as a strategic initiative by the DST to support and transform the growing national space industry. The program boasts cutting-edge innovations in space technology and has produced more than 70 postgraduates. In support of national initiatives like Operation Pakistan, CPUT took the lead in developing space applications that support maritime domain awareness throughout our vast and economically lucrative exclusive economic zone. One such service, Automatic Identification System, or AIS, detects the position of vessels in our EEZ and transmits this data to a control center. This service identifies ships that enter our marine protected areas for illegal fishing. In 2016, the DST commissioned the first of a constellation of nanosatellites to provide AIS services. Work on ZAQ-2 started soon after. ZAQ-2 is operated from the CPUT ground station with backup support through the Space Tech ground station at Gauteng. The satellite receives AIS signals from the vessels in our coastal waters. This data is put into the National Oceans and Coastal Information Management System, which was developed by the CSIR, an entity of the DST specifically for Operation Pakisa. You are looking at the first ever AIS data generated by proudly South African satellite technology. We will now no longer be reliant on foreign AIS service providers. Moreover, the innovative technologies on ZAQ-2, co-developed with South African company Stone 3, will in future support secure maritime communications. This is of strategic importance for the country and the South African Navy. ZAQ-2 is proudly South African. The mission transformed the full space industry value chain, supporting a number of Black-owned SMMEs. It is pioneering a future of constellations of nanosatellites into orbit, positioning us as the space hub of Africa and leading the country's response to the fourth industrial revolution. Watch the space.
So if I can just take you through how the satellite was built. As you've seen before, it's modular. We start off with the camera system, the K-line camera system at the bottom. That was followed by the software-defined radio payload that's used for the ship tracking. And then the next two subsystems are radios. The one is for telemetry or low bitrate communications, and the other one is for high bitrate communications. The radios were developed in-house as well as the camera in partnership with CSIR. After that, you get the computer, and then the next one that you see is an X-band transmitter. This was just for experimental purposes. And then follows the batteries. You can see the batteries there falling into place. And then the electronic power system board that regulates the power throughout the satellite. Then we have an interface board. It's just to link up the bottom part with the satellite with the top part, and the top part essentially comprises the attitude control system that control the attitude and orientation of the satellite. Right on top is an antenna. That antenna will deploy, and then the structure is put in place to keep the whole thing together. Then the most risky part of the integration, I guess, is to put the solar panels in place. They're very brittle. They're also the most expensive part of a satellite. You do not want to crack a solar panel at this point. Lead times for that is months. If you break one, then you're in trouble. So this is essentially how ZAQ-2 was integrated. I'm not going to show you the whole video, but this is in real life how it's done. You can see this in our clean room. You also see there's always 2 to 3 engineers working. You'd never have a single engineer working on a satellite. And every single screw, every single wire that you put in the harnessing, etc., is noted. There's vast documentation just to guide the engineers in integrating a satellite. Again, you should not underestimate the complexity of a CubeSat. And this is just the solar panels towards the end. That was all in the clean room of CPUT. I want to show you the excitement because this was the actual launch, 27th of December, and that was 3 o'clock in the morning in our facilities. So it was launched from Russia, which was then, I would say, around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So I just want to show you the actual launch of our satellite and a bit of the excitement that you'll experience when BOTSAT is launched in 2.5 years' time. You can see the rocket there in the middle. And they're starting up. And, that is the first nerve-wracking part of the launch. But the most nerve-wracking part of the launch is obviously when the satellite passes over your ground station and it speaks to you, or it doesn't. The launch, yes, that's stressful. The rocket can blow up and you can have a complete mission failure. But as the satellite then moves across the Earth, around the Earth, and it approaches Cape Town overhead, you really want to listen to your satellite and you really want to hear it, because then you know that your baby is alive. It's like your baby crying for the first time. That is the sweet moment that everybody's waiting for. So some data that we had, ZECube-2 is a very useful satellite. You can see here is the ship data that we follow. We take snapshots as a satellite comes over. It's not visual snapshots of satellites. We are just picking up their positions and then we plot it on the map. But you can see that we can also switch this payload on everywhere across Africa when the satellite passes overhead, or anywhere else in the world. We can do that. The K-line camera, the experimental payload, that was a secondary payload. You can see here some images. It's meant to be black and white because it's a very narrow filter. We're only looking at potassium essentially, but you can see the features of Abu Dhabi, for instance, and the Cape Peninsula on the right. And then I found, you can see here, I wouldn't say it's a puff of smoke, but it's definitely smoke coming from a veld fire. And this was somewhere in Okavango Delta a few years ago that we spotted that fire with the K-line imager. But this is roughly the type of resolution that we have with our camera on board. Looking ahead, what are we busy with? We are looking at a constellation for ship tracking. Why constellations? Just getting back to this, if you have one satellite, it orbits, you can see just past CPUT, but then it's not going to pass CPUT for quite a while. And typically a satellite passes over CPUT, in this case, is our area of interest, maybe twice in the morning and maybe twice at night. So you see your satellite perhaps 4 times a day. But what if you have 3 satellites in the same plane? We call that a plane. Then you can see you pass CPUT more regularly. You still have times when there's no satellite overhead, where essentially your satellites do not contribute to your mission. That's lost time. But at least you see more of the satellites. If you have 4, you see them more often or more times a day overhead your ground station. What we are working towards is a constellation of 9 satellites, 3 satellites in 3 planes. And then you can see that the ground station in CPUT will be covered more times by a satellite, meaning that you have more utility from the constellation of satellites. Where we are now is we've just completed the first 3 satellites. You can see them in the clean room here. We call them MDA-SAT-1, A, B, and C. MDA for Maritime Domain Awareness. The satellites will be launched in December or January 2022, in about 3 or 4 months' time. And they will be launched from America this time. So this is the mission that we've just completed. We are now busy with 2 more satellites doing machine-to-machine communications, which is very exciting. But I don't have visuals for you. We're still in the conceptualization phase there. Those satellites will be launched in 2023. So there you have it. From early beginnings in 2009, when the CubeSat program was started, it was just students. Then in 2011, we started building ZECube-1 after the first graduates came through the program. 2 years later, that was launched. And then 2 other satellites were launched called InSight and Zeta Aerosat. Those were built by other two entities in South Africa. And then ZetaCube 2 was launched in 2018. And now we're busy with MDA-SAT 3 satellites that will launch in 2021. So you can see that South Africa now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 satellites by the end of this year. And then the other 2 that I've been speaking about just now will be launched in 2023. So to finish off this is all nice, I would say, just to see, and it's quite exciting. But how did we achieve it? And just going back, what I've said about what you need to build a CubeSat, and I would argue you should not ask what you need to build a CubeSat. You need to ask what you need to build a CubeSat program. That is a more sensible question to ask, and then you look at what you need to do that. And you need a sustainable ecosystem. And the Quad Helix innovation model for sustainable development is one that applies very well to this disrupting industry that is nanosatellites. And for that, you need everybody, academia, industry and business, government and public sector, and civil society to work together. If one of those helixes fall away, then the rest unravels. You need all 4 of those pillars to work together to create this ecosystem. And I've seen that now with us. I mean, we have partnerships with other universities, for instance. We partner with industry. We bring in engineers to assist. We commercialize our data through industry, for instance. Government at this point is the sole funder of the program, as they should, at the early beginnings, and they will also be the main beneficiary of the data that we provide. And civil society need to buy in. To invest such large sums of money, there should be involvement of civil society in these programs. And in my dealings with Dr. Ogbu, I was very, very excited to see that you are moving towards a technopark, because at the nexus of universities, industry, government, and civil society, you get this spot called technoparks. And I'm so excited that you are also embarking on that, because that will bring together all of these entities that you require to build a sustainable space program, not just a CubeSat, that will come. But a program that has more than one CubeSat or Nanosat or satellite even down the line. But there's also programmatic implementation that you require, and serving the whole, I call it industrialization value chain. The CPT program works like that. We start in schools. We go out to schools and we tell them about space. That is our engagement with communities. And then there's an academic phase, students, where they are getting theory. They're getting the theory about building satellites, about engineering in space, about utilizing space through applications. That moves into a postgraduate research phase. Still students. Now the academic and postgrad research phases, that's housed within what we have, the French South African Institute of Technology. After that, it becomes very exciting. As I've said, the graduates of IFSATI moves into an innovation hub. We call it the Africa Space Innovation Center. And this is where we start building real hardware that will fly. At IFSATI, students work on the individual projects. They typically has to do a master's program and they complete that. That's fine, but that's not a complete satellite. We take the master students into the innovation hub. We call them engineers in training. They are trained and mentored by more senior engineers, and there they build the actual missions. And this is one way of ensuring success for your mission, and also that you do it within a certain timeline. Remember, students, depending on what level they are, they're either going to be involved for a year or 6 months, perhaps even just a semester. There's no continuity there. So the creation of the Space Center, the Innovation Center, was, I guess, most important to the success of our missions. And then the pool for all of this should be commercialization of your intellectual property. And CPUT spun out a company called Amaya Space a few years ago. And I would say the Technopark will house companies like the Amaya Space as the commercial partners for the innovation and the intellectual property that you develop at university in innovation hubs. Will be housed in Technoparks. And result of that is obviously this roadmap of missions. Everything that I've said, yes, you need that, but at the end of the day, a roadmap of missions is going to ensure that you have a sustainable program, that each satellite has more utility than the previous. And that's the only way how we learn to build more complex satellites. Our first satellite could not track ships. Now, tracking ships is not of interest to Botswana, but it is to South Africa. CPUT, which is a university, is now in a place where they can actually provide useful data to the country to manage its coastline better. And with that, Prof, I thank you in all the languages from South Africa. That is my presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Professor Robert Van Zyl, for this very illuminating presentation. I think before I make any further comment, I would like to recognize the presence of our Honorable PAMSEC, Professor Nelson Toto, who joined the presentation. Professor Toto is an internationally acclaimed nanoscientist in his own right, and is one of the pillars behind this satellite program, alongside Honorable Minister, our Vice Chancellor, and Mr. Rone Fotego from the ministry. I would like to thank you for shedding a lot of light on the roadmap for implementing a realistic satellite program. And I think, as we've discussed before, our time frame now is tight, it's 2.5 years, but the commitment and the determination to launch that CubeSat from Botswana is there. It's a national project. It's one that holds a pride of place for all of us involved with the project. And we have full support at the institutional level from the Vice Chancellor. And as you've mentioned, we are not only looking at just ensuring that we're able to launch. It's a whole program in its own right, but a program that will have both a vertical integration and a horizontal integration, so that it's tied to a technopark, and so it fulfills several missions. One is to be able to collect relevant and important information for the country that will be used in policies and planning, as well as bring a lot of foreign direct investment, because skills and technologies would have been developed by those who are engaged with the program, similar to what you've done in South Africa. So I wouldn't go into more details now, because we have this session for questions and answers. But I would also like to put a structure in that, where I would like to invite our Honorable PS, Professor Nelson Toto, for any questions or comments, followed by the Vice Chancellor, Professor Tutolo, and then the Director of Special Projects, Mr. Rone Fotego. And then we can take one or two questions because of time from the members of our community who are here today, and then we'll go to the closing remarks. So, Professor Toto, sir.
Thank you very much, DVC, for those comments. Thank you, Robert, for an inspiring presentation. I should admit that I'm a bit, my heart is in my mouth at the moment, because it would seem the task is much, much bigger than I thought. And I'm hoping that my colleagues at BUST were listening very carefully, because, once you have made a commitment to the president, simply we can't go back. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we revisit our thoughts, so that we can begin to progress and address all those intense steps that are very key to the process. So, I mean, with just those few words, let me just thank you very much for revealing all to me. I'm hoping that we can have access to your presentation, because I saw that it was being recorded. because my honorable minister is next door, but he's doing other things, and I would want him to have a look at this so that me and him can sit and really talk and begin to understand exactly what our expectations should be. Newer expectations, we have always had expectations, of course, in terms of this project, but I think this presentation has made me sort of regenerate my thinking, and I think it has raised the expectations, but really brought the challenges that are very key to the bear. So I look forward to engaging with the team at BUST, and also your involvement, as I know that they've brought you in as one of the key players to get us there sooner. Thank you very much, DVC, and thank you very much, Rob, for your presentation.
Absolute pleasure.
Honorable PS, I think I'd like to invite the VC, Professor Tutulu, for any comments or questions, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Ogu. I think my comments will be more when I do my closing remarks. But just to acknowledge the brilliant presentation that Robert made, it is very clear that for us to succeed, it requires teamwork. It requires people with different expertise. It requires collaboration. It requires a lot of coordination. It requires even learning from those who have done it before. I think the lessons are very clear, and we must move with speed. I know what the peers have said, that this is one project which we cannot afford to fail. His Excellency is looking at us every minute. He'll pick up a phone and call the VC and say, by the way, how far are we with this project? I don't want to be telling stories. I'll be sitting on you, Professor, I'm sorry, this is a public domain, Professor Ogu, for us to deliver, because we have promised the nation, we have promised His Excellency, we have promised the Permanent Secretary, and they are closely looking at us, and they will be asking questions, and legitimately so. So mine really is to say we have planned, we have had Bob, and fortunately he has kindly agreed to work with us closely, and we must deliver, Prof. There are no two ways about it. And that's just one key attribute in your performance contract. And I'll be looking at you very closely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, VC, sir. I think I would like to ask Mr. Ronnie Futego for any comments or questions or observations, the Director of Special Projects in Motte, please. Mr. Futego, please. Sir.
Thank you so much, DVC, for that. And thank you, Robert, for the really enlightening presentation. And the PS, I think my PS has already reiterated a lot of points that perhaps I was going to say. But in any case, speaking from the government side, I'll be quite interested, Robert, to know actually how the South African government is actually funding this project. Is it doing it on staggering, or how much does it cost for a particular mission? Say the first one that you have done, because like the PS has already said, I think we just discovered particularly new things. Maybe we need to, revisit again our strategy in terms of implementation. And if you could give us some sort of indicative figures on how much does this thing cost. We can always take this offline in terms of the figures. I'll get it through the VC or the DVC. Yeah. Now that is all, Prof. Ogu.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ronnie. And I think, as Professor Van Zyl has already mentioned there, and we've had the commentaries, it's going to be a teamwork. There's a lot of commitment. The first time I engaged with this project, the first question I did ask was the clean room, because I come from a background where I have run a clean room myself for about 20 years, making nano components. And we understand exactly now from Professor Van Zyl's presentation, all is going to entail, both in terms of human resource and financial resourcing, but the commitment is fully there. We have skilled manpower within our institution, and we've brought in externals, especially like Professor Van Zyl, who's going to be collaborating with us. And we also have an international advisory committee. That will also help in terms of accessing funds from different agencies. One of the agencies I intend to approach as we progress onwards is the International Telecoms Union. I think, Robert, you mentioned that the ITU in Switzerland, I know that they have supported some other countries with the project, but also we have the commitment here. I think our first priority will be to move very quickly in terms of building the infrastructure and the human capacity. We can adapt the skill set that we have here and bring in additional skill sets. And we'll be working very, very closely with you, Robert, and others that will be putting together, working with you to make sure that we can meet this, the time frame. The good thing is that you have a track record of launching and delivering satellites, and that's exactly what we want to do. And you are just, next door to us. And I think I'm able to also say that part of the plan is to have a joint venture between BIOS Enterprise Limited and Clyde Space that will be located on our campus. That will really bring the technology closer and closer home so that our staff, our students can interface. And then once we build that capacity here, the long-term sustainability, of course, will be to have spin-off companies that will generate the income so that we can service the rest of the SADC region with the satellite technology. And as you can see, Honorable Pamsek has said the commitment is there to the level of the minister, and this is a presidential project. As VC has said, we can't afford to fail with this project. We just have to deliver. And I think working closely with you, and I think, in the past I've had engagements with Clyde Space and with other, like Astrotechnic, where I have some of my researchers who have worked there before. We are really looking forward now to working very, very closely with you. And I think from time to time, there are meetings scheduled where you will have a meeting with our VC, a Director of Special Projects, and if PS is free because his diary is really tight to get, and we can invite PS so that we have a regular briefing, because part of the process is that regular briefing on what we've done, what we need to do, getting the clean room, getting the testing facilities on ground, getting the manpower together, and then making sure that we have that interaction between academia, government, private sector, and the public society, civil society, because that's really what makes the whole program successful. I could take one or two questions. I don't tend to see hands up, but if we don't have, I think there's one hand. No, there's no. I don't see any hands up at the moment. I think it's just a minute. I need to get my second eye, which is my glasses, on. Could you just progress with the questions, sir? Somebody has raised their hand.
I have my hand up, Prof.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Very, very quick question, just to thank the organizers. My name is Tiamo Motsapa from the Department of Computer Science at University of Botswana. Just to thank the organizers for organizing this very good event, and for Professor Van Zyl's presentation. I do concur, it's very, very enlightening. I was very particularly impressed with your slide on the sustainable ecosystem. I think it's very, very evident that we need that pipeline of training. But two questions, one quick one. Is there a correlation between the size of the satellite and its operational lifetime? And also, what about the receiving stations on the ground? Could you say maybe a little bit more about what you've done on the ground regarding receiving stations and obviously the data processing pipelines? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. I think I'll just take the second question so that Professor Van Zyl can take the two together to save time. Professor Gizao Mengitsu, do you want to ask your question, please? See your hand.
Thank you, Professor Ogu and Professor Van Zyl for the wonderful presentation. As you have shown us, the nanosatellite, South African nanosatellite, you have been working to really show capacity building demonstration. And the kind of sensor that you have on some of these CubeSat satellites, are they comparable to the big payload, like for instance, BOTSAT? You have already indicated that you can detect fire. but the size of the satellite could probably limit the kind of data that can be usable for scientific purpose. Is it possible to have really a good science data from CubeSat as compared to the big payload such as MODIS satellite? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think, Robert, just one more person, and I think we can close the questions. Is Tebogo Kajane. Please, sir, do you want to ask your question, and then Professor Van Zyl can now answer those questions.
Thank you very much,
Kajane.
Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. My name is Tebogo Kajane. I work for Botswana Bureau of Standards, and I'm sitting in or rather a member of advisory committee for physics and astronomy at the department in BUST. What I wanted to appreciate is something that Prof talked about earlier on regarding the involvement of other stakeholders, particularly the community. A project like this that are normally launched by the president, or that the president is looking forward, His Excellency is looking forward to, will normally have an impact on the community in terms of the agenda that has been set by His Excellency. I wanted to appreciate from Robert and on to what level did they involve or engage the community in appreciating the importance of such projects or such missions and the impact thereof in terms of the economy, because that is at the end of the day, that's what we are looking for, especially with regard to the community. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think Professor Robert Van Zyl can now make his comments or respond to the questions, please.
Thank you. Let me just take a step back. I hear the comment about your heart is in your mouth. I wanted to bring across the message, that these are not toys. These are real spacecraft that one is building. They might be smaller, but we did it. And I think the takeaway for you is, if I only started with a space experience 12 years ago, me and a team, and it was this ecosystem that we were allowed to put into place that allowed us to be successful. So if you put the right things in place, success will follow. That is my message. I think I appreciate that you may be a bit scared now, apprehensive about what's lying ahead, but that's the exciting part. Space is not easy. So when you hear that baby scream in space, that is a huge relief. That's the excitement of being a space engineer. So don't be too much dissuaded by about the message. There's a recipe of doing these things, and I just shared you my recipe, and it seems to work. There was a question about the size and lifetime. Size does not dictate the lifetime of a satellite. It's what components you put into a satellite that dictate the lifetime of the components. So what we say is that to keep the cost down for CubeSats, we use commercial off-the-shelf components. They are not space graded. That is an order of magnitude more expensive immediately. So in big satellites, because the cost is so high, you have more expensive components. We use typical components that you will find in automotive industry. That limits the lifetime. ZeroCube-2 has now been in space for almost 2 years. It's still 100% working. Our first CubeSat operated for about 5 years, and then it started to degrade. So 3 to 5 years, that's ballpark that you need to have your business case based on, so that you get enough data in that time, to make this financially feasible as well. So it's not the size of the satellite that limits the lifetime. It is a conscientious decision to go with commercial off-the-shelf components to limit the cost. But through experience, you know what components last and which don't. I mean, there are ways and means of making a mission last longer with these commercial off-the-shelf components. There was then a similar question about the sensors and the size. Do we get the same quality of data that you get from the MODIS, for instance? No, there's obviously physical limits. For instance, on a CubeSat, you cannot put a camera that's bigger than the satellite. And that dictates, the focal point and optical length dictates the resolution that you get from a satellite. So currently, I think state-of-the-art CubeSats, and remember, they're a bit bigger than this. They're 2 of these or 4 of these together. You can get down to a meter resolution. You can do that. The complexity of that just is cutting edge, I would say, in the CubeSat world, whereas this is more sort of generally used or applied experience with in bigger satellites. The radiometric quality of the sensors, obviously, cost drives that, not the size necessarily of the CubeSat. So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that the size of the satellite necessarily diminishes the quality of your sensor. It is always driven by cost. And I just want to get back to the value of CubeSats. Individual images might not be of the same radiometric quality than what you get from bigger satellites, but you can have 100 satellites in space taking a picture of the same area every hour. So you can have much more temporal resolution images of a certain area following a fire, for instance. You can almost follow it in real time, whereas with MODIS you cannot. You will see it, and then maybe the next day or the next month you will see the same spot again. It's all complementary. We're not replacing bigger satellites, we're complementing with new and exciting applications. Receiving stations and data processing. We have 2 receiving stations here at CPUT. Right up to S-band. That's how we download data from. We also have a backup. I wouldn't say a backup. We have an alternative ground station access through the space agency in Hartbeespoort, which is in Gauteng, in the northern parts of the country, or central parts of the country rather. Big data is going to come. We're not even in that position yet where we have volumes and volumes of data, but that's going to come, and that's where the computer scientists must step in. Security is going to be an issue. The dissemination, interpretation, and categorizing data will come into play. So that whole, I don't know much about it, but the whole big data paradigm, I would say, follows as soon as you have all of these satellites in space. So yes, we are starting to talk more and more to computer scientists to get closer. How do we manage the data that we get from the satellites? Because all of a sudden we now have 3 satellites. Very soon we're going to have 10 satellites in space. Your data volumes obviously get more and more voluminous. But also the security of that data needs to be safeguarded as well. And that's aspects that we have not really looked at this point. There was a question about community engagement, the value of community engagement. You know, I can't put a value on that. There's a moral obligation for us to share with community what we are doing with their resources. Remember, we are public funded. So we must explain to them that whereas there's a pressing commitment maybe for something a bridge that needs to be built somewhere, or now you invest a similar amount of money in a satellite that the average person do not see, does not know about. They don't see the applications. So how do you justify that? And this is a political question as well. So our role is to partner with our governments. We go into communities, we explain to them the value. What is it? Basically, this is presentation that I've given to you, but obviously a bit more toned to learners. So that at a young age, we tell them about the value of space. And it's more of a long-term investment into the knowledge of the community so that they buy into what you do with their money at the end of the day. It's public funded. You have to show the value that you bring to the table in a very real, now that we've reached this point where we track ships, And we can also track small ships, and we can have emergency beacons on the ship that's communicated to the satellite and down to our ground station. So now we can go to the communities and show them, to the fishermen, normal fishermen, here is a cheap or a cost-effective way of, when you get into trouble, press that button, the satellite will pick it up and help will be sent to you. So this is more of a longer term engagement. I just want to say how we do it. We engage with governments. They have open days, they have science centers. We've just created a very, very high-tech science center in the middle of the Eastern Cape in a rural town called Tofenbaba. But this is ethically, we need to do that, because long term you need the buy-in from the populace to invest in space, and they can see the returns from those investments. I think I more or less answered the questions that I can remember. Prof, there is also in the comments section, is it the case that nanosats of less than 10 kilogram have an average operational lifetime, especially of 1.1 year? That's not true. I don't know what source you have. As I've said, it's not dependent on the size of the satellite. It's a decision that you make beforehand about the components that you buy, the quality and the cost of the components. Our satellites typically, they're less than 10 kilograms, last 3 to 5 years.
Thank you so much, Professor Van Zyl, for the answers and comments. Just before the VC does the closing remarks, I would also like to mention that we'll be working very closely with you, but we want to move even ahead of South Africa in certain areas, because our interests and needs are not exactly the same as yours. Like, you have adapted your cameras to marine environments. I would want to see infrared cameras that will be very useful to monitor plants, agriculture, wildlife, for tourism, you know, the areas that are of immediate relevance and importance to us, because with very good quality infrared cameras, we can collect. I know you're using the K-Lines camera for yours, which is potassium based, but very good infrared cameras. And I think we'll look at investing in that. We'll now collect information that will complement what you already have. And it's a question of determining our needs and correlating them. So we'll share experience, we'll compete with each other. That's the way to progress. And then we'll share information with each other where necessary, and we'll compete with each other as well where necessary. So, but we're really looking forward to a fantastic time to ensure we can deliver our first CubeSat in 2.5 years and then progress the process. And there's a lot of support. I would like to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, PAMSEC. There's a promise that we'll get a clean room. A clean room is so crucial for us to be able to assemble all the necessary components for the satellite. So I'd like to thank PS. We have.
So the minister is here. So you can see the minister is here. So I'm
Honorable Minister, please let me welcome the Honorable Minister for Mote. Sir, you are most welcome, Honorable Minister, to this meeting. Thank you. We are so honored, Honorable Minister, to see you attend this meeting. And I think, Professor Van Zyl, you can see the level of commitment that we have to ensure that this project is successful and is a long-term project. It's not a short. I think I will allow the Honorable Minister to address us. Sir, Honorable Minister, please, if you'll be able to say a few words before the closing remarks are said, sir. You're welcome to the podium, Honorable Minister, sir.
You know, I'm about to vote this side in Parliament. Unfortunately, just give me a minute. I would really appreciate to say something.
Okay, sir.
Just 1 minute.
We'll just wait, sir. So I think just while we're waiting for the Honorable Minister, the excitement from our side, the commitment, the determination is there. And we all know that in science, once there is a will, there is a way. I mean, I look at very big satellite projects now, and I know that in the late 1950s, early 60s, they started with CubeSats and nanosats, and things have now gravitated onto what they are now. And I'm looking at us in Africa engaging seriously with the rest of the world in terms of information sharing, in terms of policy formulations for the environment, for agric, for health. These are a lot of very valuable information that we can collect remotely and used to advance, even fire damage, as you mentioned. These are areas that are really, really important. And we have a strong team of scientists in BIUS and other institutions in Botswana who can come on board to join us.
Good evening.
Yes, sir, Honorable Minister, sir.
Could I come for the launch? Is it ready?
Good evening, sir.
Our Prof, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
No, I just want to thank you for the commitment. I can see it's way above after 6 o'clock and you are still working. And it shows that really you are really taking this project and you are giving it the seriousness it deserves. I just want to say through Professor Totolo, everybody there, thank you very much. The PS just been briefing me throughout, and he has really explained to me how you have taken this project to another level. And I can't wait for us to show the world what BIUS and everybody is made of. And once more, I just want to assure you my support. Anytime you need me, Prof. Toto is there. And please make sure that you change around if there's anything which you need us to look around, which we have made some commitments earlier and other things. Let's move, let's do the right thing. You know, we cannot say, since we are doing the things now, in 2021, we'll start off with others who did things in 20 years ago. We should move with the times. So the commitment and the level, he's just briefed me about the invitees who are speaking today. It shows that you're really taking this thing seriously. And you know what it means to this country. And you know what it means, Professor Totolo. I always remind you of that year, that I'll be standing under a morula tree in 30 East trying to convince people. They will say, that's a satellite. So you know what it means. They will be asking me about the satellite. So I really appreciate. I just want to say thank you very much, Prof. Totolo and the team. Thank you very much, professors.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, sir. I think I would like to now invite Professor Totolo, Vice Chancellor of BIUS, to give the closing remarks as a mass.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ogu, the Honorable Minister of Tertiary Education, Research, Science and Technology, Honorable Douglas Letsola Tebe, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tertiary Education, Research, Science and Technology, Professor Nelson Toto. Colleagues, good evening. I would like to thank Professor Robert Van Zyl for such an insightful presentation this evening. Colleagues, as you may be aware, the core mission of the BOTSAT-1 project include the following inter alia: to put Botswana at the forefront of science and technology in Africa using an indigenous satellite technology program as one of the platforms, and to use satellite technology to collect data which will inform future planning and strategies for economic sectors that include agriculture, tourism, mining, mineral mapping, telecommunications, science and technology, STEM, education, urban planning in Botswana, amongst others. The university has made progress in this project as evidenced by the following key milestones since inception. The project was launched in December 2020 by His Excellency, Dr. Mokwetsi Eric Masisi, the President of the Republic of Botswana. A BIUS BOTSAT team commenced activities on the project in January 2021. Memoranda of understanding were signed with some foreign universities and agencies with interest in satellite technologies between January and June 2021. And a management committee and a steering committee has been set up within BOOST for the project. The university will henceforth move rapidly beyond this preliminary work to commence real-life and real-time hands-on training on the design, assembly, and launch of an operational CubeSat with effect from August 2021. And we are very, very fortunate that somebody who has done it, not only once, but many times, is here with us this evening, Professor Robert van Zyl. And he has kindly agreed to work very closely with us as we endeavor to send our BOTSAT-1, our very first, into space. He'll be there to work with us very closely, Honorable Minister and PS, and I'm very grateful for that. The next steps in BOTSAT-1 implementation cycle are as follows. Hands-on training program on mission analysis and design. Choice of relevant technologies to be adopted for CubeSat-1, spanning sensors, actuators, spectrometers, integrated circuits, power systems, batteries, radio communication components, computers, backup solar power, structural stability of the frames. We saw the vibration when Bob was demonstrating how they went through theirs. It is a real satellite. It is not a toy. I think he kept on emphasizing that. So it will vibrate, and we need to understand how it will respond to those vibrations for reliable data collection and transmission. Satellite component identification, assembly, and manufacture. Access payload production advisors and planners. To us, Honorable Minister, it's about collaboration, it's about teamwork, it's about coordinated efforts to make sure that we succeed. There are no two ways about it. And it is about learning from those who have done it before. Earth-based testing of the communication, data acquisition, and reliability of the components and data transmission and payload deployment and delivery into orbit. I've had an occasion to talk to the team, and they promised me I may be divulging a secret that Ogu was keeping away from everyone, that Bob has kindly agreed that as his satellites pass through Botswana and we are establishing something here, one of the things maybe from the ground station would be, are they able to pick up signals of the things that are going above us? And if we are, then we know that we are in the right path of making sure that when ours is up there, it will be able to be sensed on the ground to collect the data that we want. We therefore, look forward to working with Professor Robert van Zyl and our other international and national collaborators in launching the first Botswana CubeSat in the shortest possible time. I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you very much. Pula Baretsu.
Pula.
Pula.
Thank you, Prof. Ogu. You are mute.
And thank you, Honorable Minister PS, Director of Special Project, Professor Robert van Zyl. We really appreciate you, and we look forward to breaking a lot of new grounds with you. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Bye.